learning to deal with the new you is kind of what was actually going on in this episode. Just learning to deal with what actually is the new you. Mm, mm. Mess. Pure D mess. Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking on the video. This is my review for Interview with the Vampire. This is episode 3, which is actually entitled, Is My Very Nature That of the Devil? But of course. And this is like an ongoing thing. Louis is in a constant struggle with, is there humanity left in me? Am I really just evil? All along, Louis, you were some of both. So naturally, there would be an internal struggle. Naturally. And he's kind of feeling the burn of it. But in this episode, and the funny part, this was kind of like a filler episode that led us to the next thing. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Wasn't a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot in here. It wasn't boring at all. You know, it was definitely necessary for the story that we're into, but just wasn't a whole lot going on. So Louis basically introduces the idea of killing only what we will call bad folks to Lestat. Lestat, again, that sadistic behavior of his and that narcissism show up. And he's like, okay, Louis. I mean, it's one of those things that we've done. He really can't say no to Louis because he does love Louis. He's in love with Louis. Louis in love with him. They got a total connection. But he gonna do it the way he wants to do it because the narcissism in him is gonna make him do it the way he wants to do it. And there's always gonna be a sadistic twist to it. So sure enough, he agrees. Fine, Louis, we'll try it. Very first thing he does, he sees a guy. They read in thoughts. This guy, he ain't such a great guy. Okay, he's not such. He ain't all that bad, but he's not such a great guy. So he's like, okay. So what Lestat does, he goes in, he attacks the guy, he grabs him, and he snaps the guy's spine. See, it's always sadistic. Why not? You could put Lestat. You could put him in a trance. You can do what you need to do. You could drain them without the pain, without the all of that. You could like mask all that, but you don't like that. You like the hunt. You like the fear. You like the whole sadistic nature of putting the fear and then the torture and the pain onto the people. You like it. You like it. So you just were being sadistic. You went over there and you snapped that man's spine and you're watching his body jerk or carry on. He's on the ground in the alley. And Louis couldn't get what Louis ends up snatching and feeds on a cat. Feeds on a cat. Lestat then ends up calling Louis a hypocrite. Told me he's a hypocrite. No, you're shady. That's what it is. I mean, Louis is who Louis is. Louis was always partially good, partially bad. Louis like Catwoman. He really is. Louis like Catwoman. Louis is sexy and good on the inside, but his outer shell is a cat burglar. You know, he's going to do what he needs to do to get what he wants. That's just who he is, and that's who he's always been. But you, Lestat, are problematic. You're problematic, and I would love to delve more into Lestat's whole story, though I don't think I could stand it because I think you were just always messed up. But you know, whatever. Anyway, so let's go back to real time. Daniel and Louis get into it, and they're kind of having a little back and forth, and it's kind of like this, you know, you know, why do you want to tell a story like this? This is not the way the story was originally in the tapes, this, that, and the other, on and on and on. He says, well, self-reflection and time. I see it differently now. I'm not lying. I'm not changing the story. I see things differently now because time is going by. He says, a half a century later allows me to have my odyssey, is what we'll call it. And then he turns around and he kind of shames Daniel about being a junkie. I said, ooh, not getting your lick back. And then Daniel was saying, I'm not a victim. Yes, I did what I did, and I'm not going to let you shame me. It was what it was. I made really bad decisions since that thing. So they're challenging each other, which again is assisting. There is a bond. There is clearly a bond that is beginning here with Daniel and Louis, and it's not of a homosexual nature. It's more they have a bromance going on. It's a thing of respect, respect of the struggle, and they're in a way like old friends. Like they met each other's screwed up self, and now they're both on something totally different. So there's definitely a whole bond being built. Is it a dangerous space to be in? I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think so. Because the conversation between them is real eggshell like. Anyway, we go back to the past. There's this Miss Brown. She's a singer. She's exceptional. She's there. Um, Here, she's gotten very again. Lestat is drawn to people who are extremely talented. He has formed this bond with her, so she's always hanging around. She's got bold. She asked them about their sexuality. She threw it out there. She clocked them. She clocked their tea is what happened. And what side of the bread is buttered for you. So she only pushed and play so much with it. And then Louis kind of allowed them to go ahead and sex each other. He went ahead on. He didn't like it, didn't like the idea. But to keep the facade going, he allowed Lestat to have her from time to time, because with the diet that he's actually keeping up, he's not feeding on people, he's feeding on small animals and stuff, just enough blood to live. It has lowered his libido. um he's not as strong as he could be, or he was at one point. um and then there ends up just kind of like being this little thing between Louis and Lestat. And Louis like a little jealous, he keeps watching as this goes on. He's a little jealous of the little thing with Miss Brown and Lestat. She's screwing his man. Now, let's just call it what it is. You screwing my man. How am I supposed to feel? Okay. And again, Lestat, you know what you're doing. You're being shady. And he says, from time to time, I like a little something different. And he says, oh, so again, there goes Louis. Because remember, even at the core, Louis ain't no real pushover. Louis said, well, if that's the case, then I should be able to lay up with who I want to. He said, yeah. Now, when you turn the mirror back around on Lestat, of course, he doesn't have a reflection. So it's like, what's up? And he ain't gonna be all done. He says, yeah, sure, go ahead. Because he doesn't believe that Louis is gonna do it anyway. He knows that Louis is just jealous. So he gonna play it. Didn't that blow up in his face? Anyway, now let's talk about the business. Times have basically changed as opposed to the business of whoring. Okay, it has changed. Things has gotten easier. Um, the powers that be are basically trying to change things to where no, we just ain't going to let. Because again, a lot of money is not getting to the proper places. Whorehouses just don't make all the tax payments that they're supposed to. They're pretty much, speakeasies and things. Now, the old dude who had actually offered Louis the 15% back in the day, he's actually working now. He is the seat with the powers that be. And he is working basically against Louis' success. Okay. And it's like, okay. So we hear about that. And I said, well, when's that going to come up again? You know it's going to come up. And remember, Louis went against him, then wanted 15%, and Lestat bought the business from him and all that. So he been carrying a grudge. Let's swing on over when I told you that Lestat's little plan of playing in Louis's face blew up in his face. Louis ends up running into an old friend, old fine Jonah. Jonah was a friend of his from back in the day when he was young and sampling and tipping around with his sexuality. Jonah had went on off to the war and everything, and he come back, and Jonah, Jonah ran up on Louis, and baby, he want that old thing back. Now remember, Lestat said, "Yeah, you can screw somebody if you want to." Well, here go his chance, because he had just got the permission to do it, but he had never done anything. And Lestat was like living for that and just going on, still doing what he want to do. Well, baby, they went on down to the bayou, honey, and then next thing you know, baby, him and Jonah done had. The whole time they were having their little tryst, you could tell something wasn't right. And I said, mm-mm, mm-mm. Of course, Lestat can actually sense Louis, wherever Louis is. It's that attachment. And he can feel that urge is stirring in Louis. And of course, Louis, he can't read Louis's mind anymore, but he can feel there's an attachment that they have, baby. He can feel them juices stirring. Anyway, he done watched, and baby, Jonah went, and when I said Jonah went on down, baby, and gave Louis some of what he been missing, honey, he gave him what he been missing. Oh, what you been missing, honey? He was tearing him up, honey. I said, oh, and he was literally fighting the urge to bite because he could hear Jonah's heart beating, and it was like being overcome. But there's a thing. He got a thing for Jonah, baby, because that go way back. You did a thing, it go way back, baby. He took and he bit himself in his wrist to deter him from wanting to bite Jonah. Baby, Jonah, when I tell you Jonah blew his wig back, baby. Jonah gave it to him. Um, I was like, okay. And you could just tell, I could just feel it that Lestat was somewhere watching. He was. He was. Shortly after that, Louis ends up having this whole big run-in with the family. He hasn't been around. And then word gets back to him basically like his family is he hasn't been around, and they really don't want to be bothered with him. They're not telling him anything. The sister now has got like 3 kids, and he don't really know exactly what's going on. The kids growing up, and it's like other things. Mama has like she's like something going on with my mom, but she kind of figured out something's going on, and it ain't all under what we believe in as pertains to Louis. And he ends up going there to the house, to Grace's house, and he's basically disowned and cast away from the home by Mama. And she says the devil walks at night. She clocked it. And she probably just don't know exactly what to call it, but she knows that there's a dark force and a darkness over top of Louis that just don't sit with her aura. So she's like, they're scared of you. And he comes in, he's like, my mom, this, that, and the other. He ends up losing his temper, and he ends up kicking the door, and the door like flies off the hinges and everything. And the twins, there's twin girls, his sister has twin girls, and she said, they're scared of you, because there's been things being said. And Grace just looks at him and said, get out. Get out. So he basically been cast away from the family. You lost everything. You lost Paul. Now you done lost Mama. You lost Grace. You don't have the nieces and the nephews anymore. You're just out there. It's turning. You're more and more ain't nothing in your life. But Lestat, honey, your life is crap. Okay. He goes home really in his feelings. Lestat has a house filled with the troops under mind control, because you're going to lay up with Jonah. See, now I got to do something shady and narcissistic and make you pay. Now I'm having a whole orgy, if you will, setting up an orgy with all the boys. got them all under mind control. And it was really tough to do because it was making his nose bleed and stuff like that, but he was doing it. He had them all under control and everything. And he basically admits to being jealous too. He was jealous. So that was that. I said, I'm glad they kind of just handled it that way. And it didn't, because I thought he was going to do something to Jonah and I was going to be pissed. I was going to be mad, baby. I said, because I want to see Jonah and Louis come back together, honey. I want to be a fly on the wall, baby, and see it some more. So don't you dare mess with Jonah, honey. Anyway, that was hot, honey. Jonah and Louis. Baby, so where you about to take, honey? Yes. Anyway, so you all remember the old guy that was trying to get out on Louis. We come to find out through some mind reading and some other things that were kind of going on. The guy who was working right with Louis finds out all along he knew that things were going to turn on Louis. He had been working with the powers that be all along, working sideways. We'll try to take over Louis' business. So it all, was like a whole backstabbing type of situation. They're not really aware of how Louis really gets down. And it's like, okay. And then everything, the business starts going belly up. So Louis goes and Louis like, this is ridiculous. He takes and makes his whole organization blacks only. Blacks only. And it just kept going downhill. Cops start citing him unfairly, citing the girls, just really making things hard for him. So where they were doing so well, now they're not doing as well. And it started to get pissy. And this is where Louis taps into that whole is my very nature, that of the devil, because it tapped into, when he's been done so wrong. And then it's the whole, oh, you've been doing me wrong all along. You was working me all along. That's the issue. And when I tell you he went to see old dude and they had a little tete-a-tete and old dude called himself gonna talk some shit to Louis, baby, Louis slain him and strung him up on his gate in front of his property for his people to find. And that little act, was a life lesson about one act that makes you feel so good, but it's such a terrible act, can actually snowball into something so terrible where you really, your one act just so you could feel good and feel like you got vengeance can really screw up all the people that you were doing good for. And that's what happened. This caused a whole outcry and a whole battle. And it became like a sort of like a little race war. And it turned into a whole riot where they were burning down the whole street and like right on the black side. It just turned out really bad. And they're burning the place down. And in the midst of it, there's one thing, he always will find one thing to help him through what the dark time was and what he did so wrong. He's like, I got to do this one thing right to try to save the little bit of humanity I got. There was a house that was actually burning and there was a young girl inside. Her name was Claudia. And he was able to go in there and he rescued Claudia. Though he's the one that actually kicked everything off, that started the riot, and so many people died and people lost their livelihood and all of that. He was able to save Claudia's life. And he rescued her, and I'm going to leave that here because that's where this episode actually ended. And then it picked up again in episode 4. So I'll see you all in episode 4 later for now.